"That was wonderful. We should try again," said the virgin Apache woman. The cowboy liked it. The sun was just rising over the endless plains, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. A lone cowboy rode slowly across the wide, empty fields. Dust rose around his horse's hooves, leaving faint trails behind. The cowboy had been traveling for many days. His clothes were worn, his hat tilted low over tired eyes, and his boots were scuffed from long rides. He carried a small pack and a rifle across his back, ready for whatever the journey might bring. He was a man used to silence, to thinking and moving quietly through a world that often felt harsh and unforgiving. As he neared a small frontier town, he noticed the wooden buildings casting long shadows over the dusty streets. The town had a trading post, a saloon, a few cabins, and a blacksmith shop. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the sounds of daily life began to fill the air, horses whinnying, a dog barking, and people moving about, starting their day. The cowboy slowed his horse near the trading post, tying it carefully to a post. He took a deep breath and looked around. The town was small, but it had a sense of life and community, something the cowboy had rarely experienced during his lonely travels. Inside the trading post, the scent of dried meat, leather, and fresh coffee filled the air. Shelves were lined with goods from all over, metal pots, cloth, tools, and small trinkets that seemed almost magical to someone who had spent weeks on the trail. Behind the counter, a man nodded at him, recognizing the traveler immediately. The cowboy gave a brief nod in return, his eyes scanning the room quietly. He did not speak much, but people in these small towns had learned to respect quiet men who carried themselves with calm confidence. As he was examining some leather straps, he noticed movement near the doorway. A young Apache woman had entered the trading post. She was strong and tall, with dark hair braided neatly down her back. Her eyes were sharp, observing everything with intelligence and curiosity. She moved with a grace that seemed natural, almost like she belonged to the land itself. The cowboy felt a flicker of interest, though he did not show it immediately. He had met many people during his travels, but there was something different about her, a quiet strength, a calm presence, and an air of independence that drew attention without effort. She walked past the shelves, carefully picking up a few items, a small bundle of herbs, a handmade knife, and a piece of cloth. Her movements were precise and confident, showing that she knew what she wanted and how to get it. The cowboy watched from a distance, curious but respectful. He was not a man to interrupt or make the first move without reason. He simply observed, noticing small details, the way her eyes lingered on objects with thought, the way she held herself, the way she smiled slightly when she found something that pleased her. Finally, their eyes met. For a brief moment, the cowboy felt a connection that was hard to explain. It was not just attraction, it was recognition, like seeing someone who understood a part of life he had long forgotten. She looked at him calmly, without fear or judgment, and he returned the gaze with the same quiet respect. There was no rush, no pressure, just a simple acknowledgement of each other's presence. In a world that often demanded quick judgments and actions, this moment of stillness felt unusual and comforting. The woman approached the counter and began speaking with the trader in her own language. The cowboy listened quietly, trying to catch a few words, understanding little but appreciating the sound of her voice and the confidence in her tone. He realized that she was not afraid to speak her mind, to express her needs clearly. This impressed him. Many people in these small towns were polite but reserved, often hiding their thoughts behind cautious words. Here was someone who was honest and direct, and it intrigued him. After finishing her business, she turned toward the door. The cowboy stepped forward, careful not to appear too forward. "The trails are getting rough out there," he said simply. "Are you heading far today?" His voice was low but steady, carrying the experience of someone who had spent long hours on horseback and in the wilderness. She looked at him with a slight smile. "I am going to check on my family's camp," she replied in careful English. "The roads are safe if you follow the main path." There was a warmth in her voice, a mix of caution and friendliness. The cowboy nodded, appreciating both her honesty and the subtle offer of guidance. "I know a bit about trails," he said, "but thanks for the warning." They exchanged a few more words, talking about the weather, the conditions of the plains, and the life of people who lived so close to nature. Even in this brief conversation, the cowboy felt a sense of familiarity with her, as if they had shared moments before in some unspoken way. It was rare for him to feel at ease with someone so quickly, and he noted it silently, feeling an unfamiliar but welcome curiosity growing inside him. Before leaving, she looked directly at him. "Be careful out there," she said. "The plains can be beautiful, but they are not always kind." Her eyes held a seriousness that reminded him of the dangers he had faced on his own journeys. Yet, there was also a kindness in her expression, a desire for him to be safe. The cowboy tipped his hat in acknowledgement, a small gesture of respect. "I will," he replied. "You take care as well." The days that followed saw the cowboy returning to the town regularly. Each time, he and the Apache woman exchanged greetings, small conversations, and occasional advice about life on the plains. They shared stories of survival, of challenges faced alone in the wilderness, and of the small joys discovered along the way. Their friendship developed slowly, naturally, without force or rush. It was built on mutual respect, curiosity, and a quiet recognition of each other's strengths. He learned about her life, the traditions she followed, the skills she had learned from her family, and the respect she had for the land. She learned about his experiences, the hardships of traveling alone, and the lessons he had gained from years of solitude. Each encounter left them both with a sense of understanding and trust that was rare in a world full of strangers. One morning, the cowboy arrived in town to find her outside the trading post, carefully tending to a small fire for cooking. The smell of roasted corn and herbs filled the air. She smiled when she saw him, a warm and genuine expression that reached her eyes. "Good morning," she said. "Did you sleep well last night?" The cowboy nodded. "As well as anyone can on the trail," he replied. They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that comes easily when two people feel a growing connection. They spent some time walking along the edge of town, observing the wildlife, the flowing river, and the distant mountains. The Apache woman pointed out tracks of deer, signs of water sources, and hidden places that few travelers knew about. The cowboy listened intently, learning more about the land than he had in years of traveling alone. In return, he shared his knowledge of the stars, navigation, and survival skills. Their friendship became a partnership of sorts, each teaching and learning from the other in ways that strengthened both of them. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with golden and purple hues, the cowboy and the Apache woman stood together quietly, watching the horizon. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of the plains. Neither spoke at first, simply sharing the peaceful moment. Finally, the woman turned to him and said, "The world is wide and full of danger, but it is also full of beauty. Sometimes we forget the beauty when we only focus on survival." The cowboy nodded, realizing that in meeting her, he had found not only a companion but also a reminder of life's deeper meanings beyond the endless trails and hardships. As darkness fell, the cowboy knew he would continue his journey, but something had changed. The presence of the Apache woman had stirred feelings of trust, curiosity, and a quiet admiration. He did not yet know where this connection would lead, but he felt certain that their paths were meant to cross more than once. The plains, vast and unpredictable, suddenly felt a little less lonely. And in that realization, the cowboy found hope, companionship, and the promise of new experiences waiting just beyond the horizon. The morning sun rose slowly over the plains, casting long shadows across the soft, golden grass. The cowboy woke early, his horse grazing quietly nearby. He had spent the night at the edge of the town, close enough to feel its presence but far enough to enjoy the calm of nature. Today, he intended to explore a trail that led toward the hills beyond the river. He packed his few belongings carefully, adjusted his hat, and whispered to his horse, "Let's see what's out there today." At the same time, the Apache woman had begun her day. She moved with quiet efficiency, tending to the small garden near her family's camp. Herbs and roots grew in neat rows, carefully maintained over the years. She watered them with a gentle hand, humming softly a tune she had learned from her mother. Life was simple but demanding, requiring attention, patience, and care. Her family depended on these plants for food and medicine, and she carried the responsibility with quiet pride. Their paths met once more near the river. The cowboy had followed the trail, guided by instinct and memory from past travels. He spotted her first, sitting on a rock near the water, washing a few freshly caught fish. The sun reflected off the flowing river, creating small sparks of light that danced across her hair. She looked up, noticing him immediately, and offered a small nod of greeting. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady and calm. "The trail is safe if you follow the river." He returned the greeting with a quiet smile. "Thanks, I appreciate the advice." He dismounted, patting his horse gently on the neck. The cowboy was careful not to startle her or invade her space. Over the past weeks, he had learned that trust grew slowly and must be respected. The Apache woman watched him with sharp eyes, noticing the care in his movements, the calm strength in his posture. There was no rush between them, only the natural flow of recognition and mutual respect. They decided to walk along the river together, each step bringing them closer not just in distance but in understanding. The cowboy pointed out certain rocks that marked hidden paths or safe crossings. She explained how to recognize the tracks of animals, where to find clean water, and how the land could tell stories if one paid attention. Every detail she shared fascinated him, and every tip he offered helped her navigate parts of the land that had changed since the last rains. Conversation flowed easily, full of curiosity and respect, building a bond that neither had expected so quickly. As they moved along the trail, the cowboy noticed how careful she was with the natural environment. She avoided stepping on fragile plants and made sure the animals were not disturbed. "You treat the land like it's a living thing," he observed quietly. She smiled, a little shy but proud. "It is. The land gives life and it deserves respect. It tells us where danger is, where food is, and how to live without destroying what we need." Her words were simple but full of wisdom. The cowboy nodded, realizing that her knowledge was not only practical but also spiritual in a way he had rarely encountered. They shared small meals together: bread, dried meat, berries, and roasted roots. The Apache woman taught him how to prepare some of the plants she had grown, showing patience as he learned the delicate ways to cook them. In return, he shared dried fruit he had carried from previous stops, explaining how to preserve it and pack it efficiently for long journeys. These small exchanges created a sense of partnership, each teaching and learning from the other. The afternoon brought challenges. A sudden thunderstorm rolled over the hills, dark clouds covering the sun. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets, and the river swelled slightly. They had to find shelter quickly. The Apache woman led the cowboy to a small cave hidden behind a line of bushes, barely noticeable unless one knew it was there. Inside, they waited as the storm raged outside, listening to the sound of rain hitting the rocks and the distant rumble of thunder. The cowboy admired her calm demeanor. While he had survived storms before, her ability to stay composed and find safety was impressive. As they sat together in the cave, the Apache woman spoke softly. "Life is full of storms," she said. "Not just these, but others too. We have to be prepared, to think ahead, and to trust those around us. The world can be harsh, but it can also teach us what we are capable of." Her words were thoughtful, reflecting the wisdom of someone who had learned to navigate both the physical and emotional challenges of life. The cowboy listened carefully, feeling that her perspective was something he had needed, even if he had not realized it. After the storm passed, the sun returned, casting the world in a fresh, golden light. The river sparkled again, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. They resumed their journey along the trail, moving with renewed energy and shared purpose. The cowboy noticed how the storm had changed the landscape: small landslides, new puddles, and displaced branches. The Apache woman pointed out safe paths, showing that even in chaos, there was order to be found if one paid attention. Throughout the day, they shared stories of their pasts. She told him about her family, the elders who taught her traditions, and the lessons she had learned about survival and respect for nature. The cowboy spoke of his own life: long days on horseback, towns visited and left behind, friends made and lost, and the solitude that had become both a companion and a challenge. Each story deepened their understanding of one another, revealing vulnerabilities and strengths that were rarely shown to strangers. As evening approached, they reached a small clearing with a view of the distant hills and the setting sun. They sat together, watching as the sky turned from gold to orange to deep purple. The Apache woman picked up a small branch and traced patterns in the dirt, sharing the meanings behind each symbol. The cowboy listened, fascinated by the connection between tradition, land, and daily life. He realized that her knowledge was not just about survival, it was about living fully and understanding one's place in the world. Night fell and the stars appeared one by one, filling the sky with their cold, distant light. They built a small fire, its warm glow illuminating their faces. They spoke in hushed tones, careful not to disturb the quiet of the night. The Apache woman shared stories of constellations and the lessons they carried. The cowboy explained how he used the stars to navigate, to find direction when maps and paths failed. In the shared silence and conversation, a deeper bond formed, a trust and comfort that neither had felt before. As they prepared to sleep under the open sky, the cowboy realized that this day had changed something inside him. He had encountered many people on his travels, but none had offered the mix of knowledge, courage, and quiet companionship that this woman had. And she, in turn, had found in him a steady presence, someone who could face challenges with her, who could listen and learn, and who respected her strength and independence. The connection was subtle but powerful, rooted not in rush or desire, but in shared experience and understanding. Finally, as they lay near the fire, the cowboy felt a sense of peace he had not known for a long time. He looked at the Apache woman and thought about the days ahead, trails yet to explore, lessons yet to learn, and moments of trust and friendship waiting to grow. The plains, wide and untamed, had brought them together, and together they had discovered that even in a world full of challenges, moments of understanding, respect, and companionship could make the journey brighter. The night was quiet, broken only by the distant sound of a coyote and the soft rustle of the grass in the wind. They slept with a sense of shared security, each knowing that tomorrow would bring new adventures and lessons, and that whatever came, they would face it with a growing bond and mutual respect. The trail ahead was long, but for the first time in a while, the cowboy felt that he was not entirely alone on it. And the Apache woman, strong and wise, knew that in the quiet partnership they had formed, there was a chance to grow, learn, and perhaps find more than just friendship on the endless plains. The morning air was crisp and cool, carrying the smell of wet earth and pine from the hills in the distance. The cowboy had awoken early, as he often did, stretching his tired muscles and preparing his horse for the day ahead. He looked across the plains, noticing how the sunlight glinted on the river, making it look like a ribbon of silver. Today, he knew, would not be just another journey along familiar trails. Something felt different. He could sense it in the quiet of the morning and the soft rustle of the grass. The Apache woman was already awake, tending to the small fire she had kept alive overnight. She had prepared a simple breakfast, dried meat, corn, and water from the river. Her movements were deliberate and careful, each action reflecting years of experience in surviving and thriving in the wilderness. When she noticed the cowboy stirring, she offered him a warm smile. "Good morning," she said softly. "Are you ready for the trail today?" He nodded, tying his boots carefully and checking the supplies on his horse. "I am," he replied. "Where are we heading first?" She pointed toward the hills, the peaks still cloaked in morning mist. "There's a small pass I want to show you," she said. "It's safer than the main trail and it gives a good view of the plains." The cowboy listened attentively, respecting her knowledge of the land. He had learned by now that the Apache woman's instincts and guidance were trustworthy, and following her would not only be wise but also enlightening. They set out together, walking alongside their horses. The trail was narrow, winding through patches of trees and rocky slopes. The cowboy noticed how naturally she moved over the uneven ground, stepping carefully yet confidently. He tried to follow, paying attention to how she navigated the rocks and loose soil. "You've walked this path many times, haven't you?" he asked. "Yes," she replied with a slight nod. "I know where it is safe to step, where the rocks are loose, and where the animals like to hide. The land has memory if you learn to read it." Her words intrigued him. He realized that she did not just live on the land. She understood it, respected it, and used that knowledge to guide both herself and others. The cowboy admired her calm confidence, realizing that courage was not just about facing danger, but also about knowing when to act and when to observe. As they climbed higher into the hills, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers. Birds flew overhead, their calls echoing across the valley. Suddenly, the Apache woman stopped, raising her hand in a quiet gesture. The cowboy froze immediately, following her lead. She pointed toward a small set of tracks in the dirt. "See those?" she whispered. "Deer passed through here recently. And over there," she added, pointing to another trail, "is a coyote. Keep your horse calm, predators are nearby." The cowboy studied the tracks carefully, impressed by her sharp observation. He realized that her attention to detail was not just skill. It was a form of intelligence that came from living closely with nature. They moved forward cautiously, taking care to avoid alerting the wildlife. The Apache woman's presence gave him confidence. Her calm guidance made him feel safer, even in moments where danger might be near. By midday, they reached a small clearing atop a hill. From this vantage point, the plains stretched out endlessly, rivers winding like silver threads and forests dotting the landscape. The sight was breathtaking, and the cowboy could not help but pause, taking in the beauty of the world from this high perspective. The Apache woman stood beside him, watching his reaction quietly, a small smile forming on her lips. "It is beautiful," he said softly. "I've traveled many miles, but I've never seen anything like this." She nodded. "The land teaches patience. You must climb, observe, and wait to see its true wonders." Her words carried a wisdom he had not expected. He realized that traveling with her was teaching him more than just survival. It was teaching him how to notice and appreciate life itself. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by distant voices echoing across the valley. They turned toward the sound and noticed a small group of travelers making their way along the main trail. The Apache woman's expression grew serious. "We should avoid them," she said. "It's safer if we take the ridge and circle around." The cowboy agreed immediately, trusting her judgment. They adjusted their course, moving carefully along the rocks and trees, staying hidden from view. The experience reminded the cowboy of the constant challenges the plains held. Danger was not always immediate or obvious. Sometimes it was subtle, requiring observation, caution, and quick thinking. He realized that traveling with someone who understood these dangers and knew how to navigate them was invaluable. The Apache woman's skill and knowledge were more than survival tools. They were lessons in life, teaching him awareness, respect, and careful decision-making. As afternoon approached, they stopped near a small stream to rest. The Apache woman drew water from the stream, filling their canteens and allowing their horses to drink. She then taught the cowboy how to identify edible plants along the bank and how to prepare them simply for nourishment. They shared a quiet meal, sitting on rocks and watching the water flow steadily. The conversation turned personal, with stories of childhood, family, and lessons learned from elders. "I learned to be careful and to observe everything," she said. "Life in the wilderness teaches you that everything is connected, the land, the animals, and people. You cannot separate one from the other without consequences." The cowboy listened thoughtfully. He had spent much of his life alone, often relying on strength and skill rather than observation and understanding. Her words made him realize that there was a deeper way to interact with the world, one that required patience, attention, and humility. They continued their journey into the evening, moving through shaded paths and rocky slopes as the sky shifted to deep oranges and purples. The Apache woman led the way with quiet confidence, pointing out hidden markers and natural signs that guided them safely. The cowboy marveled at her ability to navigate and teach at the same time, realizing that her knowledge came not just from experience but from a deep respect for life. Eventually, they reached another small clearing as the sun began to dip below the horizon. They stopped to rest, building a small fire for warmth and light. The cowboy could feel the growing trust and connection between them. Days spent together had created a bond not only of friendship, but also of understanding and admiration. He respected her courage, her intelligence, and her skill. She, in turn, had grown to appreciate his calm nature, his patience, and the way he listened and learned. As night fell, they sat near the fire, speaking quietly about hopes and fears. The Apache woman shared stories of her people, their traditions, and the importance of maintaining balance with the land. The cowboy shared stories of his journeys, of towns visited, people met, and challenges overcome. Their stories intertwined, creating a sense of shared experience and understanding. The fire's glow highlighted the respect and curiosity in their eyes. The night was calm, with stars sparkling overhead like tiny lanterns in the sky. They lay on blankets beside the fire, listening to the distant sounds of the plains, the soft rustle of grass, the call of an owl, and the occasional crack of a branch in the forest. Neither spoke for a long time, simply enjoying the quiet and the company of someone who understood. The cowboy felt a sense of peace he had not known in years, and he realized that this partnership, built on trust, respect, and shared knowledge, was something rare and valuable. Finally, the Apache woman spoke, her voice soft but firm. "The land can be harsh, but it can also teach us who we are. We learn by observing, by listening, and by facing challenges together. That is the way to grow." The cowboy nodded, understanding that their journey was more than just travel across the plains. It was a lesson in life, in trust, and in forming connections that mattered. As they drifted off to sleep, the fire casting a warm glow, both felt a quiet determination. They would continue their journey, facing whatever challenges came their way, supporting and learning from each other. The plains were vast and life was unpredictable, but together, they had discovered courage, companionship, and a growing bond that made even the most difficult trails seem possible. The morning sun peeked over the horizon, filling the plains with warm light. The cowboy stretched and rubbed the sleep from his eyes, glancing at the Apache woman who was already awake, tending to the small fire they had kept burning through the night. She moved with her usual quiet confidence, arranging their blankets and preparing a simple breakfast of corn, dried meat, and fresh water. Her calm presence made the cowboy feel at ease. Over the weeks they had spent together, he had come to rely on her judgment and guidance. After breakfast, They set out along a narrow trail that led into a dense forest at the base of the hills. The trees were tall and close together, their branches forming a canopy that blocked much of the sunlight. The forest floor was soft with fallen leaves, and small streams cut through the undergrowth. The cowboy followed her lead, careful not to disturb the natural order of the forest. He had learned by now that patience and observation were just as important as speed and strength when traveling through the wilderness. As they walked, the Apache woman pointed out various plants and herbs, explaining their uses for food, medicine, and survival. "This plant helps with fevers," she said, gently crushing a leaf between her fingers. "And this root can be eaten when food is scarce. The land provides if we know how to look." The cowboy listened closely, fascinated by her knowledge. He realized that she had a way of seeing the world that combined practicality with respect. It was not just about survival, it was about living thoughtfully and harmoniously with nature. They paused by a small stream to let their horses drink. The water was clear and cold, and the sound of it flowing over the rocks created a peaceful rhythm. The Apache woman knelt by the water, cupping her hands to drink and filling their canteens. "The land teaches patience," she said softly, looking at the cowboy. "We cannot rush everything. Some things take time, and if we force them, we lose their value." The cowboy nodded, understanding that her words applied not only to survival but also to life itself. He felt a quiet admiration for her wisdom and the way she carried herself with dignity and strength. As they continued through the forest, they encountered a narrow path that led to a steep ridge overlooking a valley below. The trail was rocky and dangerous, requiring careful footing and balance. The Apache woman moved confidently, guiding the cowboy step by step. "Watch your footing here," she advised. "One wrong step could send you tumbling down. Trust the land and trust yourself." He followed her instructions carefully, relying on her experience while also using his own skills to navigate the path. At the top of the ridge, the view took their breath away. The valley stretched out endlessly, with rivers winding like silver ribbons and forests that seemed to go on forever. The setting sun painted the landscape in shades of gold and crimson. They stood together in silence, taking in the beauty of the world around them. The cowboy felt a deep sense of peace, and he noticed that the Apache woman's eyes reflected the same awe and reverence for the land. As they set up camp for the night, the conversation turned personal. They spoke of their dreams, their fears, and the moments that had shaped their lives. The Apache woman shared stories of her family, the lessons taught by her elders, and the ways in which her culture had guided her decisions. The cowboy spoke of his journeys, the towns he had visited, the people he had met, and the solitude that had defined much of his life. In each story, they found common ground, strength, resilience, and a desire to understand the world around them. "You've taught me a lot about the land," the cowboy said quietly, watching the firelight flicker across her face. "But you've also taught me about patience, respect, and seeing things I never noticed before." She smiled, a warm and genuine expression that made his chest feel lighter. "And you've taught me that courage can take many forms," she replied. "It's not just about fighting or surviving. It's about facing what's unknown and trusting others to face it with you." As night fell, the sky filled with stars, brighter than either of them had seen in a town. They lay on blankets near the fire, listening to the sounds of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the call of an owl, and the gentle babble of the stream nearby. The cowboy felt a connection growing between them, one that went beyond friendship. It was a bond built on trust, understanding, and shared experiences. He realized that he had not felt this level of comfort and companionship in years, and he cherished it deeply. The Apache woman spoke softly, her voice carrying a hint of reflection. "We often fear what we do not know," she said. "But when we open ourselves to trust, to understanding, and to shared experience, we discover strength we did not know we had." Life becomes richer when we face it together rather than alone. The cowboy listened, feeling the truth of her words. He had spent so long alone that he had forgotten the value of partnership, of leaning on someone while also supporting them in return. Over the next few days, they continued their journey through the forest and into the foothills. Each day brought new challenges, steep climbs, unexpected storms, and encounters with wildlife. Through it all, they relied on one another, learning to communicate without words, to anticipate needs, and to share burdens. The Apache woman demonstrated her knowledge of edible plants and natural remedies, while the cowboy shared skills in tracking, navigation, and protection. Together, they became a team, each complementing the strengths of the other. One afternoon, they came across a small herd of deer near a clearing. The Apache woman motioned for silence and led the cowboy to a vantage point where they could observe without disturbing the animals. She whispered, explaining the behavior of the herd, how to read the subtle signs of movement and alertness. The cowboy watched carefully, learning not just to see the animals but to understand them. It was a lesson in patience, observation, and respect for life, a lesson that applied to both the land and the people who traveled through it. As they made camp that evening, the Apache woman prepared a meal from roots and herbs she had gathered along the way. The cowboy helped, chopping wood and tending the fire. They shared the meal quietly, appreciating the simple nourishment and the comfort of each other's presence. The conversation turned to hopes for the future, the dreams they held, the places they wished to explore, and the values they wanted to carry forward. Each word deepened their connection, revealing the trust and admiration that had grown steadily over time. That night, as they lay beneath the stars, the cowboy felt a sense of gratitude he had not experienced in years. He thought about the long days on the trail, the solitude, and the challenges that had shaped him. Yet none of it compared to the quiet companionship and understanding he now shared with the Apache woman. She, too, reflected on the journey, the lessons learned, the strength discovered, and the bond that had formed through shared experiences. Together, they realized that life was richer, more meaningful, and more fulfilling when faced together rather than alone. The next morning brought a gentle rain, soft and steady, washing the plains and hills with fresh life. They took shelter under a grove of trees, using the time to talk, plan, and reflect. The Apache woman taught the cowboy how to read the clouds and anticipate weather changes, a skill that would serve him well on future travels. In return, he shared techniques for making temporary shelters and keeping fire alive in damp conditions. Every lesson, every shared moment, strengthened their bond and built a sense of mutual respect and reliance. By the end of their time in the forest and foothills, the cowboy and the Apache woman had grown inseparable in their trust and understanding. They had faced challenges, shared knowledge, and learned to rely on one another in ways neither had expected. The journey had become more than a simple passage through the land. It had become a journey of growth, understanding, and connection. They had discovered courage, patience, and the quiet joy of companionship in the vast, unpredictable wilderness. As they looked toward the horizon, where the plains stretched endlessly under the rising sun, both knew that their journey was far from over. Yet, they faced the future with confidence, knowing that together, they could navigate any challenge. The lessons learned in the forest, the foothills, and the quiet moments by the fire would guide them, shaping not only their path but also the bond that had become a source of strength, comfort, and hope. The first light of dawn broke over the plains, soft and golden, touching the hills and valleys with warmth. The cowboy stirred, stretching slowly as he observed the vast landscape around them. The Apache woman had already risen, preparing the small fire and breakfast with her usual care. Their camp was quiet except for the gentle sound of the wind through the grass and the occasional call of a bird waking for the day. Both of them understood that today would be another long day of travel, but neither felt rushed. They had learned to move in harmony with the land, with patience and awareness guiding every step. After eating a simple breakfast of corn, roots, and dried meat, they prepared their horses and checked their supplies. The Apache woman spoke first, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "The trail ahead leads through hills that can be tricky," she said. "We must watch the paths carefully and move steadily. But the view at the top is worth the effort." The cowboy nodded, appreciating her guidance. He had grown to trust her instincts completely, knowing that she understood the land in ways he could only admire. They set off, moving through the hills with careful steps. The trail was uneven, full of loose rocks, hidden roots, and steep slopes. The cowboy noticed how the Apache woman moved with confidence, her eyes scanning every part of the trail, guiding their steps without hesitation. He followed her lead, careful but learning, noticing small details. The way she balanced her weight, the way she listened to the sounds of the land, the way she anticipated changes in the terrain before they happened. Every step was a lesson in observation and respect. As they climbed higher, the wind grew stronger, carrying with it the scent of distant forests and wildflowers. They paused near a small ridge to rest, taking in the breathtaking view. The plain stretched endlessly below them, rivers winding like ribbons of silver, forests dotting the landscape, and mountains in the distance casting long shadows. The cowboy felt a sense of awe and calm, realizing that the journey had become more than just a physical one. It had become a journey of understanding, trust, and companionship. The Apache woman turned to him and spoke softly. "We have traveled far, but the greatest journeys are not always measured in distance. They are measured in what we learn, what we share, and how we grow." The cowboy looked at her, feeling the weight and truth of her words. In their weeks together, he had learned not only to navigate the land but also to trust, to be patient, and to open his heart to companionship and understanding. She had taught him that strength was not only physical, it was emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. They continued their journey, moving through narrow valleys and rocky slopes. Along the way, they encountered signs of wildlife, tracks of deer, a distant elk grazing, and birds flitting between the trees. The Apache woman explained how to interpret these signs, showing the cowboy how to read the land as if it were a map filled with stories. Each observation was a lesson, and the cowboy absorbed everything with care, realizing that the land held wisdom far beyond what he had imagined. Midday brought a sudden challenge. A small storm rolled in from the west, dark clouds gathering quickly and wind picking up strength. The Apache woman acted swiftly, guiding them to a natural rock overhang that offered shelter from the rain. They worked together to secure their supplies and protect their horses, moving efficiently and calmly despite the sudden danger. The cowboy admired her ability to remain composed under pressure, her mind clear and focused even in moments of uncertainty. As the storm passed, the air smelled fresh and clean, the plains glistening with raindrops. They emerged from their shelter, smiling at the way the world had been renewed by the rain. "The land has a way of reminding us of its power," the Apache woman said, "and also of its beauty." The cowboy nodded, understanding that each challenge they faced had strengthened their bond, teaching them patience, cooperation, and trust. They continued on the trail, moving with renewed energy and appreciation for the world around them. By late afternoon, they reached the top of a high ridge, where the sun began to sink toward the horizon. The view was spectacular. Mountains, valleys, rivers, and forests stretched out as far as the eye could see. They sat together on a large, flat rock, watching the changing colors of the sky, and a sense of peace settled over them. The cowboy felt a deep gratitude, not only for the journey itself, but also for the companion who had walked beside him. The Apache woman, in turn, felt a quiet satisfaction in the connection they had built, one rooted in respect, trust, and shared experience. As evening fell, they built a small fire and prepared a simple meal. The conversation turned to reflection, discussing what they had learned, how they had changed, and what they hoped for in the future. The Apache woman spoke about the importance of honoring the lessons of the past while embracing the possibilities of what lay ahead. "Life is full of paths," she said. "Some are smooth, some are rough. Some are short, some are long. What matters is how we walk them and who we walk them with." The cowboy listened, feeling the depth of her words resonate within him. Night came, bringing with it a sky filled with stars. The plains were quiet, alive only with the sounds of distant wildlife and the soft rustle of the wind. They lay near the fire, gazing upward, sharing stories and dreams. The cowboy realized that his journey had transformed, not just in the places he had traveled, but in the way he experienced life. He had discovered courage in new forms, learned patience, and found companionship in the Apache woman, someone who saw him for who he truly was and accepted him without judgment. The Apache woman spoke softly about hope and resilience. "The world may test us, but it also gives us strength," she said. "We learn to face difficulties and we grow stronger. But the greatest strength comes from connection, from sharing our journey and our experiences with someone who understands." The cowboy nodded, feeling that her words captured the essence of what they had shared. Their bond had become a source of strength, a steady presence in a world full of uncertainty. Over the next few days, they continued to explore the hills and plains, moving with purpose and care. Each day brought new sights, new lessons, and moments of quiet reflection. They shared small joys, the laughter of a bird, the beauty of a wildflower, the comfort of a shared meal. They faced small challenges together, navigating rough terrain and sudden changes in weather. Through it all, their connection deepened, growing into a partnership of trust, respect, and mutual understanding. One evening, as they rested near a calm river, the Apache woman spoke about the future. "Our paths may take us in different directions at times," she said. "But the lessons we have learned together and the trust we have built will always remain. Life is a journey, and it is richer when shared." The cowboy reflected on their time together, realizing that he had found something rare, a companion, a teacher, and a friend all in one. He understood that the bond they had formed was more valuable than any destination or goal. As the sun set for the last time on their shared journey through these hills, they packed their camp and prepared to return to the plains below. The cowboy felt a mix of anticipation and gratitude. He had traveled far, faced many challenges, and learned countless lessons. Yet, the most meaningful discovery had been the connection with the Apache woman, a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared experience. The Apache woman, too, felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that their time together had strengthened both of them, leaving a mark that would last long after their journey ended. As they rode back toward the town, the plains stretched out before them, bathed in the warm light of early evening. They moved side by side, companions and equals, each step guided by the lessons of the past days. The cowboy glanced at the Apache woman and felt a sense of completeness he had not known before. She smiled, sensing his thoughts, and in that quiet understanding, they shared a wordless acknowledgement of the bond they had built. By the time they reached the outskirts of the town, night had fallen. The stars shone brightly, illuminating the paths they had traveled and the journey yet to come. They dismounted and prepared their horses for the night, sharing one final meal together under the open sky. The cowboy realized that his life had changed, not because the world had become easier, but because he had discovered the value of companionship, trust, and shared experience. The Apache woman, too, reflected on the journey, recognizing that strength, courage, and wisdom were not measured alone, but through connection and understanding with others. As they rested for the night, the cowboy felt a deep sense of peace. The plains were vast, the future uncertain, but he no longer felt alone. He had found a partner in the Apache woman, someone who understood him, challenged him, and walked beside him through the trials of life. Together, they had learned that courage came not only from facing the world alone, but also from trusting another, sharing experiences, and supporting one another. The next morning, as the sun rose again, they prepared to continue their separate paths, knowing that the bond they had formed would remain. They exchanged a quiet farewell, their eyes reflecting mutual respect, trust, and the unspoken promise of shared memories. The cowboy rode away, feeling stronger, wiser, and more connected to the world than he had in years. The Apache woman watched him disappear into the distance, knowing that their paths had intersected for a reason, leaving both of them richer in experience, understanding, and heart. Their journey had been more than a passage through the plains. It had been a journey of growth, discovery, and companionship. Each challenge had been a lesson, each shared moment a treasure, and each day a step toward understanding themselves and each other. In the vast, unpredictable world of the plains, they had found courage, trust, and the quiet joy of connection that made life's journey meaningful and complete.